Welcome to the Inner Coach Classroom with me, Emma Benyon. I'm a multi-certified coach and educator with over 13 years of experience within the educational sector. This podcast is all about helping educators and leaders build their inner coach so that they can become confident, self-aware, and transform how they work and lead. And so if you are an educator or leader, then you are in the right place for coaching, mindset, and reflection. So let's delve into today's episode, which is all about why regulating your emotions matters in education and leadership. So, education is emotional work. Let's not hide from that. Teaching and leading are not just cognitive roles, they are deeply emotional ones. We teach and we lead because we care. And we're often navigating situations where there is intense pressure, potentially challenging behavior, accountability, relationships, and change. And when our emotions and those of our students and colleagues are left unacknowledged, they often drive reactions rather than responses. And we become reactive in the moment rather than taking a pause and responding. Now, what do I mean by emotional regulation? So, emotional regulation isn't about suppressing our feelings or staying calm at all costs. It's about the ability to notice what's happening for us internally, understand it, and then choose how we respond, especially when we're under pressure, because that is absolutely when we can become more reactive in situations. Now, this capacity to be able to notice and then choose how we respond is a key part of emotional intelligence, building that emotional intelligence and effective leadership. Because as we build our self-awareness, not only do we become much more aware of our own emotions and how we are responding, we also become aware of those responses or reactions of others too, and then how we can support those kind of responses in different situations. Now, when as leaders and educators, we are able to regulate our own emotional states, we move from a place of, reactive behaviors, and this might be snapping, maybe withdrawing and going quiet, people pleasing, maybe just saying yes without actually thinking about the consequences or when you really want to say no. And we move to a space of being more intentional, our responses being more value-led. And that absolutely, supports that alignment with how we show up in our roles. Now, this shift from, a reactive to a responding behavior affects the communication, it affects the decision making and trust. Because when we respond in a way that feels more authentic to who we are as educators and leaders, we're going to get better responses from those we are responding to. And that's because it is contagious. So our emotional states are contagious. If you've ever noticed when you've walked into a classroom and you felt really stressed, and then the classroom feels quite stressful and the student's behavior feels quite stressful, that's because our emotional states are contagious. So when we are dysregulated, our students and teams, our colleagues, they feel it as well. Yet when we are regulated, as leaders and as educators, we create psychological safety for those around us. We model that steadiness, that empathy, that clarity, even in those more challenging moments. And when we are operating from a space of, being dysregulated with our emotions, that can contribute to burnout, emotional exhaustion, reduced self-efficacy, whereas developing that emotional regulation supports that resilience, that sustainability. And so it helps us remain, as educators and leaders, effective without sacrificing, our well-being. Yet, how do we do this? Because it's all well and good me saying, this is why we need to do it and what the impact is. Yet, how do we do that? Well, coaching absolutely provides a safe space, a reflective space for us as educators and leaders to slow down and to explore those emotional patterns. It allows us to build that self-awareness, potentially of those things that might trigger us to respond, to react in a certain way so that we can respond in a better way. It helps us to build awareness of those internal narratives, those stories we might be telling ourselves, and maybe those responses that have become habits. So actually, we're not noticing how we respond in that way. We're just doing it because it's become a habit. So developing that inner coach absolutely helps us to strengthen our ability to self-regulate in, that in real time. It builds that toolkit. So how do we do this? Now, when we model that emotional regulation appropriately, that models that behavior to our students and colleagues. It normalizes that reflection, that emotional awareness, and healthy ways of navigating challenge as well without lowering those expectations. So what I would like to invite you to do in order to build this self-awareness, to grow your emotional regulation skills, is to, before you respond, is to pause. You're having a conversation with a colleague or a student, and maybe your initial reaction is to respond in a way that doesn't feel aligned to your values, to how you want to show up. Take a breath and then allow yourself to respond, allowing you to connect, to build that inner awareness and respond in a way that is much more aligned to who you are. And there's a question I would like to share with you, which again is a prompt that you might want to journal on, or you might just want to pause and spend some time thinking about. Often we can ask ourselves, how do I stop feeling like this? And that's not a particularly helpful way to build that self-awareness. Rather, ask yourself, what is this emotion telling me? And how do I want to respond? And I'll leave you with that for today's episode. Lots to think about in there in terms of how you can build your emotional awareness, how you can support being able to regulate your emotions in a way that allows you to respond rather than to react. So thank you for listening to today's episode. I would absolutely love to hear your reflections. So why not come and chat to me over on socials, on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at emmabenyon.coach. And if you'd enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend, please subscribe, and please leave a review so that you don't miss out on an episode and so that I can hear your thoughts and we can get out there how educators and leaders can build their inner coach in some really simple and effective ways. So until next time, we'll keep building your inner coach together, one episode at a time.